2 hours earlier, Chicago O'Hare, Gate 12A. Nia Ellington didn't look like she belonged in first class, and she knew it. She wasn't dressed like the others. No tailored coat, no Louis Vuitton carry-on. Just a black hoodie, gray joggers, and her favorite pair of scuffed Nikes. Her hair was pulled into a puff, messy in a way that wasn't accidental. Her backpack had a small green keychain that read, E-Priority Pass. Level 1 access. She didn't flash it. Didn't need to. The scanner beeped, the gate opened, and she stepped onto the plane like she had 100 times before. No drama. No delay. Until Meredith Blake saw her. Meredith had worked first class for over a decade. She could spot a wrong seat before someone even put their bag down. And this girl, no entourage, no pearls, no heels, was a wrong seat. At least to her. Nia walked to 2A without hesitation and began settling in. Pulled out her notebook, plugged in her headphones. No fuss. Meredith was there in seconds. "Sweetheart," she said, her tone laced with sugar and suspicion. "I think you might be in the wrong section. Coach is further back." Nia didn't even look up. 2A. Meredith folded her arms. "Right. Do you have a boarding pass for 2A? Nia handed over her phone without a word. "Passenger, Nia Ellington. Flight NC217. Seat 2A. Status, cleared priority access." Meredith's smile thinned. "Must be a glitch. I don't see you on my paper manifest." A voice came from the galley. "She's cleared," said Marcus, the younger attendant. "Top of the digital manifest. Flagged E-level. Let her be." Meredith gave him a sharp look, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned back to Nia and said, "I just need to see some ID." Nia looked up now, slowly. Her voice was low but firm. "Your colleague confirmed everything. Why are you still questioning me?" "Ma'am, it's standard protocol." "No, it's not." Meredith's jaw clenched. "Look, you might think first class is just a seat, but it's a space for professionals. Executives, people who actually paid?" Nia finished for her, eyes now steady. "People who fit a profile, right?" Meredith didn't answer. Nia leaned back. "I've flown first class more times this year than you've probably served in it." Marcus winced. Meredith stepped in closer. "I'm trying to protect the integrity of this cabin." "From what?" Nia asked. "Teenagers in sneakers?" "From disrespect." There it was, the word. And that was the moment Meredith made her choice. She reached forward, just a little, just enough to say, "I control this cabin," and grabbed Nia's arm like she was escorting a toddler off a playground. Nia pulled back. "Don't touch me." Meredith's face flushed red. She muttered, "I'm not doing this today," and slapped her. Open palm, sharp, across the cheek. Gasps, silence, eyes wide. A full cabin witnessing something that didn't feel real yet. Marcus stepped forward, horror on his face. "Meredith, what the hell are you doing?" "She's not supposed to be here," Meredith shouted. "She's lying." Marcus turned to Nia. "Your name is Nia Ellington?" She nodded. He turned back to Meredith and said the one sentence that turned Meredith's blood cold. "She owns the seat, and half this airline." Back in 2A, Nia tapped her screen again. Emergency ethics trigger, activated. FAA notification ETA, 4:35. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't scream. She just scrolled. That slap? It didn't just bruise her cheek. It rewrote the future of every person on that plane. And they had 5 minutes left before the sky started answering for it. The cabin was holding its breath. Even with the engines humming, even with the cabin lights set to their gentle pre-flight glow, there was a thick pressure in the air, like someone had cracked a seal on something sacred and wrong. Meredith stood frozen, her hands still tingling from the slap, her body locked between panic and pride. She'd convinced herself she was doing her job. She'd convinced herself she was protecting the airline. But now she couldn't convince herself of anything. especially as Marcus's words rang in her head on loop. She owns the seat, and half this airline. That couldn't be right. That had to be a mistake. She looked around, expecting someone to speak, maybe back her up, but no one met her eyes. No nods, no reassurances. Just passengers pretending to read, blink, breathe. Anything but acknowledge what they just witnessed. Across the aisle, Naya sat still, one hand resting gently on her lap, the other holding her phone, the screen dimmed but still glowing faintly. She wasn't texting, wasn't posting. She was just waiting. Marcus moved first. He stepped closer, crouched beside Naya's seat. "Do you want me to call the pilot?" he asked quietly. "We can delay takeoff, file an incident report. We can—" Naya didn't look at him. Her eyes were focused straight ahead, as if watching a movie only she could see. "No delay," she said softly. "We're flying." "But Meredith, she'll stay on board." Marcus blinked. "You sure?" Naya finally turned to him. Her voice was calm, measured, dangerous in its control. "She's going to sit through this flight like nothing happened," Naya said. "That'll be worse than any headline." Marcus nodded once, slowly. He stood, shot a hard glance at Meredith, then returned to the galley. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for departure. Flight time to Boston will be 1 hour and 47 minutes. Please take your seats as we prepare for takeoff." Meredith stumbled back to her jump seat at the front of first class. Her hands trembled slightly as she buckled in. She looked down, eyes unfocused, heart pounding. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every time she blinked, she saw the stillness in Naya's face. The refusal to cry, the refusal to scream, the refusal to be small. Meredith had dealt with difficult passengers before. She'd been yelled at by hedge fund bros, snapped at by movie stars, ignored by bored billionaires who never made eye contact. But this was different. This girl didn't react. She recorded. That terrified her more than anything. 20 minutes into the flight, the air was smooth, but the tension hadn't gone anywhere. Meredith had tried to busy herself, tightening her apron, checking on drinks, reviewing inventory. But her hands kept fumbling. She'd spilled seltzer, knocked over a tray of peanuts, dropped the service manifest. Nothing could steady her. She kept stealing glances toward 2A. Naya hadn't moved much. She'd jotted something in her notebook, just one line, then closed it again. She'd looked out the window for a while. Now she sat reclined, eyes closed, earbuds in. Not asleep, just present. Meredith hated that. She stood, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, and forced herself to walk down the aisle. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, her voice strained but trying. Naya opened her eyes slowly, looked at the bottle, then at Meredith. Her expression didn't change, but her words sliced. "Do you think I want something from your hands?" Meredith flinched. I just thought..." "You thought you could slap me and then bring me water like it never happened?" "I didn't mean to..." Naya tilted her head. "You did exactly what you meant to do. The problem is, you thought I couldn't respond." Meredith's mouth opened, then closed again. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." "Why?" I didn't know who you were." Naya sat up straighter. "And what if I was nobody? What if I was just some girl flying private for the first time? What if I didn't have $1 billion fund backing me? Would you still be sorry?" Meredith looked down. "No, yes. I don't know." "You weren't sorry when you thought I was powerless," Naya said. "You're only sorry now that you think you might lose something." Meredith nodded slowly, tears stinging behind her eyes. "You're right. I know." And then Naya turned her head toward the window again. Conversation over. Back in the galley, Marcus stood waiting. He didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow when Meredith returned empty-handed. "What did you think was going to happen?" he asked. "I don't know," she murmured. He leaned in. "You know the entire cabin has cameras now, right? Every inch, including first class, including jump seats." Her breath caught. I forgot. He shook his head. You always remember until it matters. Meredith sat down hard, her knees weak again. She was unraveling. Not because someone yelled at her, not because someone posted her video online, but because this was different. This was corporate. This was internal. This was irreversible. Up front, the cockpit door cracked open. The captain stepped out, tall, silver hair, calm demeanor. Captain Alan Travers. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He just said, "Ms. Ellington, may I speak with you?" Naya stood without hesitation. Marcus followed them both to the back of the plane, where a small private conference room was tucked behind a panel near the crew storage. It was quiet, soundproof, dimly lit. Captain Travers sat across from her, folded his hands. "I've been flying 28 years, he said. "I've never seen anything quite like this." Naya didn't speak. "I just got off headset with HQ, he continued. "They've confirmed your identity, your fund's position, and the fact that this flight is now under direct review by the FAA. Naya blinked. "Good." Captain Travers exhaled. "Ms. Blake, Meredith, will be grounded the moment we land. But I imagine you're not stopping there." She placed her notebook on the table, open to a page. Blueprints, policy drafts, a heading at the top. Flight Justice Protocol, Tier 1 implementation. "This was supposed to launch next quarter," she said. "I'm moving it up." Captain Travers studied it. "And this will affect all Sky North linked airlines. 4 of them, 125 lounges, 3 major U.S. airports, all of it." He looked back at her. "You're triggering a full audit." "I'm triggering a culture shift." He sat back in his chair. "You've got my support." "I know." Back in the cabin, Meredith sat stiffly in her jump seat. Her uniform felt too tight, her collar itched, her throat burned. Passengers weren't looking at her, but she felt them watching, felt their judgment, their unease, their discomfort. She'd flown thousands of flights, served champagne to people who didn't know her name, handled emergencies, kept calm in turbulence. But right now, she couldn't calm her own heartbeat, because no announcement had come, no apology had been made, but something had shifted in the air. Not fear, consequences, and they were coming fast. 40,000 feet in the air. The jet glided smooth and silent, but the world underneath had started to shift. At exactly 3:42 p.m. Eastern, a trigger rippled through the internal system of Ellington Fund's aviation ethics platform, a proprietary tool known only to top federal regulators and 3 key personnel inside the investment firm. One of them was Naya Ellington, and her tap, done quietly in seat 2A, had just fired the most powerful silent weapon in modern commercial aviation, the emergency ethics trigger. This wasn't a tweet. It wasn't a phone call. It was a contract-bound signal tied directly to federal compliance systems, FAA oversight, and every dollar of conditional capital Ellington Fund pushed through the veins of America's air travel ecosystem. 3:43 p.m. Ellington Fund, NYC headquarters. The notification arrived without sound, just a soft pulse of red across a single screen in the risk oversight room. A man in a dark blazer leaned forward, reading the words, "Ethics Trigger Activated Flight, NC-217, Sky North Airlines, Initiator, Naya Ellington, Tier 1 Credential. Timestamp 15:42:18, Review, Countdown, 4 o'clock remaining auto protocol. Alert FAA Ethics Division. Suspend active disbursement cycle, preemptive lockout, initiated." "Jesus," he muttered, standing up fast. "We have a live trigger from Naya." A woman across the room blinked. "Which airport?" He turned. "Sky North. That hits Boston Logan, San Diego, St. Louis, all Tier 1 funding lines." Without further debate, the 1.1B active capital flow to Sky North linked airlines began to lock, like freezing the bloodstream of 4 carriers at once. 3:44 p.m., FAA Ethics Division, Washington, D.C. Inside a sleek, secure office with no logos and double soundproofing, 2 agents stared at their screens as the ping hit. "Emergency ethics violation. Source: Ellington Tier 1 Trigger, Live Passenger Incident Target. Airline Sky North Consortium FAA Safety Clearance. Risk 71.2%. Holy hell, said Agent Keller, reaching for the phone. We've got a Tier 1 ethics drop. Flight still airborne. His partner tapped keys, pulling satellite data. Confirmed. Aircraft NC-2197. Currently en route ORD to BOS. We've got video sync being requested. Cabin footage has already been flagged. Keller turned to the map wall. And Boston is one of the affected terminals? It is. So are STL and SAN. He didn't hesitate. Lock all three. 3:45 p.m. Boston Logan International. At Gate B12, passengers boarding a later Sky North flight paused as digital signs flickered, then turned red. Delayed. Operational review in progress. The gate agent picked up the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a temporary technical delay. We appreciate your patience. Behind her, 2 TSA officers and a man in a dark suit quietly entered the Sky North Terminal operations room. The FAA's lockdown protocol had begun. No news reports yet, no press releases, just digital silence and stopped movement. And across the country, the same quiet freezes were happening in San Diego and St. Louis. 3:46 p.m. Back on the plane. Captain Travers sat in the cockpit, head set tight, watching the inbound messages scroll across the monitor. His co-pilot looked over, brow furrowed. Sir, did that say ethics downgrade? Travers exhaled. Yeah, not just for us. It's for the whole damn consortium. The co-pilot let out a low whistle. 3 airports affected. That's not minor. It's Nia Ellington, Travers said, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. Everyone in high-level aviation knew the Ellington Fund, but not everyone knew the weight of that name when held by a 16-year-old girl in a hoodie who never raised her voice. 3:47 p.m. First class cabin. Marcus returned from the galley, where he'd overheard the pilot's feed. He knelt beside Nia's seat. We've been flagged by the FAA, he said quietly. I know, Nia replied without looking up. They locked 3 airports. I know. Do you want to speak to HQ? Nia finally turned to him. Not yet. He swallowed. Do you want Meredith removed? Nia shook her head. She can stay, for now. Marcus hesitated. Are you? I need her to feel it, Nia said softly. Not the punishment, the pause. That breath before everything changes. Marcus nodded and stood. He didn't fully understand her, but he respected it. 3:48 p.m. Sky North HQ, Legal Division. The phones were ringing non-stop now. The General Counsel stared at the incoming notice from the FAA. Your operations are under immediate review. All flights through BOS, STL, and SAN terminals are frozen until further notice. One of the execs looked pale. This isn't just a passenger issue, is it? No, the council said. This is infrastructure. It's ethics-based funding. And she pulled it. Who is she? Someone asked. Another answered, voice shaking. She's the one who decides if we exist tomorrow. 3:49 p.m. Cabin silence. Meredith hadn't moved since takeoff. Every part of her felt heavy now. Her shoes, her belt, her name tag. She kept looking down, trying not to cry, trying not to feel the eyes that weren't even looking at her, but the silence hurt worse than yelling ever could. And Nia? She hadn't looked her way once. 3:50 p.m. FAA notification complete. The timer on Nia's phone reached 0. System notification. Ethics downgrade applied. Sky North Airlines. Restricted status. FAA Tier 2. Ellington Fund disbursement suspended across all Sky North subsidiaries. Flight Justice Watchdog Protocol now active. Nia locked the screen. Just one tap. She sat back, in silence, because the slap wasn't the story. What happened after was, the flight continued at cruising altitude, engines humming as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The passengers in first class tried their best to act normal, flipping pages they didn't read, sipping drinks they didn't taste. But the silence had weight now. It pressed against them. It made every breath shallower, every glance more cautious. In seat 2A, Naya sat with her eyes closed. She wasn't sleeping. She was waiting. Not for vengeance, not for attention. She was waiting for the system to catch up to the truth. At Sky North headquarters, 3:52 p.m. East. The legal team's conference room looked like a war zone. Not from noise, but from silence and chaos wrapped in corporate calm. 6 executives sat stiffly around the table. The general counsel, CFO, VP of operations, chief PR officer, and 2 internal compliance directors. Every single phone was on silent, but the blinking screens told the story. 20+ missed calls from FAA contacts, urgent email flags, texts with subject lines like ethics freeze, Ellington trigger, and media queries incoming. The general counsel finally broke the silence. "We've confirmed the source. It's a Tier 1 ethics trigger from Ellington." Someone cursed under their breath. The CFO leaned forward. "So what? They just pulled the plug because a teenager didn't get orange juice fast enough?" "She got slapped," the VP of Ops said quietly. "By one of ours, in first class, in public." "Still," the CFO argued, "they're treating this like a nuclear meltdown." The compliance director didn't look up. "It is," the CFO snorted. "Come on." "No, seriously," the director continued. "When Ellington triggers a Tier 1, it bypasses public channels. They don't need a tweet. They don't need a lawyer. They just notify the FAA, and capital flow halts automatically. We've got $1.1 billion in play, now frozen." "Then unfreeze it," the CFO snapped. The general counsel looked up. "We can't. That's the point. That's her point." A heavy silence fell over the table. Then came the real question, spoken low but heavy. "Who is she?" The room went quiet again, until one of the assistants, young, maybe late 20s, standing at the door with a tablet in hand, answered. "Her name is Naya Ellington. She's the fund's direct heir. She's the one who approves the ethics score across the Sky North consortium." "And no one knew she was on that flight?" The assistant shook his head. "She travels under partial anonymity, for discretion." The general counsel leaned back. "Which means we didn't just assault a teenager in first class. We assaulted the person who literally holds our future." On board, 3:55 p.m. EST Meredith was unraveling. She sat rigid in her jump seat, staring into the galley wall like it could swallow her whole. Her fingers fidgeted with the corner of her apron. Her name tag felt like a curse now. Meredith B. All caps, no place to hide. She couldn't stop replaying the moment. Not the slap itself, but the instant after. The stillness, the way Naya didn't react. She had expected shouting. She had braced for chaos. But the silence was worse. Across the aisle, Naya hadn't spoken a word to her. Not a glance. Not even contempt. Just nothing. That nothingness cut deeper than any confrontation ever could. 3:56 p.m., FAA press office, Washington, D.C. Phones were beginning to ring. Not media yet, but internal liaisons, regional airport staff, and state regulators. Everyone wanted the same answer. Why are 3 airports locked without explanation? The lead communications officer typed fast. She knew the Ellington name, she knew the protocol, but she didn't know what the headlines would look like once the world caught up to what had already happened. 3:58 p.m., New York, Ellington Fund Situation Room. The ethics division lead spoke into a secure line. "We need visual confirmation of cabin conditions." A tech pulled up the cabin footage in real time. Seat 2A, front and center. Naya, calm, hoodie on. Meredith, stiff, pale. Marcus pacing gently near the galley. The feed had no sound, but the stillness said everything. The lead nodded. Verify trigger was appropriate. Verified, the assistant replied. Incident matches behavioral trigger profile. Unsolicited physical contact, identity discrimination, lack of internal de-escalation. An airport impact? FAA confirms. Logan, San Diego, St. Louis all entered soft lockdown. No public alert yet. Flights rerouted. Terminals slowed. All 3 CEOs have been pinged for emergency compliance review. The lead turned back to the screen. This is what accountability looks like. 4:00 p.m. Back on the plane. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Cabin crew, prepare for descent. Meredith's chest tightened. Her hands felt like ice. She knew what was waiting after landing. She didn't need to see a pink slip. She could feel the blade in the air. Marcus walked by her, paused. "You okay?" he asked softly. She couldn't answer. He didn't push. He just kept walking. Naya opened her eyes, not because of the noise, but because the 5-minute timer had ended. She glanced down at her phone. Ethics score updated. Sky North, downgraded. FAA notified. Lockdown active. Watchdog protocol engaged. She locked the screen and smiled. Not a big smile, just a small curve of recognition. The system worked. Boston Logan, 4:07 p.m. It started with silence on the runway. A Sky North jet inbound from Toronto hovered over the tarmac like a question waiting for an answer. Tower control had already been briefed. No Sky North linked aircraft may proceed to final approach. FAA soft lockdown. Code, Ethics 7A. Ground crew looked around, confused. Gate staff refreshed systems with error codes blinking, but the instructions were clear. Hold, no explanation to passengers until instructed. No alarms, no announcements, just stillness. And soon, stillness spread. St. Louis Lambert International, 4:08 p.m. 3 boarding gates went dark. A crowd gathered around the check-in monitor as a mother with 2 young kids asked, "Why does it say hold instead of boarding?" A clerk offered a polite smile. "Just a tech delay, ma'am." But behind her, security staff was already escorting a Sky North operations manager off-site for questioning. Nobody said the word ethics trigger, but it sat in the air like fog before a storm. San Diego International, 4:09 p.m. The airport's vice president of airline affairs stared at her tablet. 3 Sky North flights frozen. 1 diverted midair to Phoenix. All internal Sky North terminals locked for compliance checks. She tapped her phone. Speed dialed the FAA liaison. "Is this a system error?" "No, ma'am," came the voice on the other end. "This is Ellington." And then she understood. This wasn't a glitch. This was war. New York. 4:10 p.m. Sky North headquarters. CEO Randall Geis stood at the window of his 28th floor office, phone glued to his ear. His face had drained of color. His tie was loosened, but he hadn't noticed. "I need clarity," he barked. "Is this a full freeze or temporary review?" His chief counsel responded over speakerphone. "It's a Tier 1 trigger. That means a full freeze of all capital tied to ethical compliance. Not just ours. Allied Airlines, Liberty Skies, Aero Vent, all of us. How long? Until Ellington restores our status. Restore? No. We demand they reverse it. I want a meeting with their board." The council hesitated. "You don't understand, Randall. She is the board." "What?" "Naya Ellington, the girl. She's not a figurehead. She's the authority." He staggered back a step. "She's 16. She's the one holding the $3.8 billion credit line. Age doesn't matter. Position does." Geis gritted his teeth. "Set up a meeting." "You've already been summoned," the council said. "FAA is calling emergency compliance hearings. All 4 CEOs. You've got 36 hours to appear in DC. Boston Logan. Private terminal. 4:13 p.m. Naya stepped off the plane like nothing had happened. Her hoodie was still on, backpack slung over one shoulder. No press, no flash, just 2 security officers in plain clothes flanking her, calm and silent. Meredith didn't speak as she passed. She couldn't. She just stood frozen in the galley, staring at the cabin like maybe, if she focused hard enough, she could rewind time. But there was no rewind. Only consequence. Ellington Fund, command floor. 4:15 p.m. A large monitor tracked live flights. Most moved normally, but every flight linked to Sky North system was blinking yellow or red. A line of text crawled slowly under each. Pending ethics review. Restricted capital access. On the right of the screen, 4 profile photos appeared. Randall Geis, CEO. Sky North Carolyn Duvall, CEO. Aerovent Marcos Jimenez, CEO. Allied Airlines Jeffrey Hall, CEO, Liberty Skies. Each one tagged, Mandatory Hearing, 36 Hours, FAA Compliance Courtroom B. One of the assistants turned to Naya, who stood quietly behind the room's glass partition. Would you like to issue a press release? Naya shook her head. No spin. Statement? No, she said. Let the system speak first. Words come later. The assistant nodded, typed a silent command into the system. Los Angeles Times newsroom, 4:18 p.m. An editor stared at a breaking alert from a source inside the FAA. 3 airports shut down in under 10 minutes. Sky North tied to Ellington Fund ethics trigger. Passenger identified as Naya Ellington. She looked up at the intern across the room. Start writing. Title it, The Girl Who Grounded the Skies. Back at Boston Logan, 4:20 p.m. As Naya's SUV pulled away from the private terminal, Meredith remained in the jump seat, her body still. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew something was ending. Not just a job, a belief, a way of being. She had built her whole identity on control. Control of the cabin, control of passengers, control of image. But she had no control now, just the silence she'd earned. New York, 4:22 p.m., Ellington Fund, boardroom. A panel of advisors gathered around the table as Naya entered. She dropped a thin folder on the table. Inside, an updated protocol for Flight Justice Score, TTM. Preliminary draft of the Flight Ethics Charter list of airline partners on conditional approval. I want this in place before the FAA hearings begin, she said. One of the advisors, mid-60s, former DOT appointee, leaned forward. You understand the impact of this, right? You're rewriting how the skies operate. Naya nodded. They rewrote the rules without asking, she said. I'm just returning the pen. New York, 8:05 a.m., 36 hours later. The boardroom on the 41st floor of Ellington Fund wasn't built for cameras. No wood-paneled drama, no polished speeches, just steel, glass, and quiet, which made it perfect for what was about to happen. Naya stood at the head of the long black table. She wasn't dressed in power. No blazer, no heels, just a dark green crewneck, tailored jeans, and her hair pulled back into a neat puff. Simple, silent, grounded. But when she opened the folder in front of her, the room sat straighter, printed in bold across the front. Flight Justice Charter Ellington Fund. Aviation Ethics Protocol 4.0, effective immediately. 12 people sat around the table. Advisors, strategists, 2 former DOT regulators, 1 and retired airline CEO, and the head of Ellington Fund's Aviation Risk Division. Naya spoke calmly. She didn't need to raise her voice. For too long, airline conduct has relied on PR damage control instead of principle. She paused, let it land. We don't fix behavior by spinning it. We fix it by making it expensive to ignore. She slid copies of the charter across the table. One of the advisors, A seasoned man in his 60s with silver-rimmed glasses flipped through the pages. He murmured as he read, half in disbelief. Mandated bias training, FAA-verified passenger complaint reporting, anonymous cabin witness registry, live audit of first-class incident patterns. He looked up. You're turning morality into a metric. Naya nodded once. We already do it for turbulence, for maintenance. Why not for people? Another advisor leaned forward. You're tying capital flow to this? Naya didn't blink. Every dollar. Any airline that refuses to sign the charter loses Ellington Fund access. Immediately. The room went quiet. Then came the question she was waiting for. And what about Sky North? Naya smiled. Small, tight, but unmistakably real. They've already received the revised contract. It includes a clause. Reactivation of funding is contingent on full public acknowledgement, internal compliance realignment, and onboarding the charter with their top 3 executives as public signatories. She tapped her phone once. The projector screen behind her lit up. 4 airline logos. Beneath each, pending response. 48-hour deadline. Washington, D.C. FAA headquarters. 9:14 a.m. The 4 CEOs stood in front of a federal panel. They had flown in quiet, under heavy advisories. No press, no formal reprimand yet. But the air in the room said everything. You're not in charge anymore. Each of them had already received Ellington's new terms, and the message was clear. Sign or be shut out of the sky. Sky North's CEO, Randall Geis, looked pale as he spoke into the microphone. We recognize the severity of the incident. We are fully cooperating with all FAA and funding audits. The chairwoman leaned forward. Do you accept the Flight Justice Charter as a binding ethical standard? He hesitated. Yes. Click. A pen scribbled. 1 signature down. Boston. Sky North. Internal Town Hall. 12:42 p.m. Meredith stood in the back of the room, arms folded tightly over her chest, trying to disappear into her uniform. She hadn't flown since the incident, not suspended officially, just rotated off active duty. But everyone knew. She could feel their eyes when she walked in, could feel the whispers, the not-so-quiet silence. On the large screen at the front, a video began to play. Naya's face appeared, pre-recorded, calm, direct. If you're watching this, you work for an airline receiving capital from the Ellington Fund. That means we hold each other to a higher standard. Meredith stiffened. We know what the industry says about training. Check the boxes, repeat the phrases, get back to boarding. This isn't that. The room didn't move. This is about asking yourself a different question every day. Did I treat someone better today because I finally saw them for who they are, not who I assumed they were? A long pause. Then the video faded to black. New York, Ellington Boardroom, 2:00 p.m. The advisors were signing. One by one. Ink on paper, terms agreed, framework ratified. The Flight Justice Charter was live. An alert pinged Naya's screen. Allied Airlines, signed Aero Vent, signed Liberty Skies, pending review. Sky North, compliance. Submitted, she closed the folder. Spoke only once more before leaving the room. This wasn't about making headlines. It was about drawing a line. The sky doesn't belong to arrogance anymore. It belongs to accountability. She turned and walked out. No applause, just the quiet sound of a new policy taking root. Elsewhere, that same day, a young black woman in Atlanta boarded a first-class seat in silence. The flight attendant, older, white, with a kind face, smiled warmly. Welcome aboard, Dr. Martin. Would you like a warm towel or sparkling water? No suspicion, no hesitation, just respect. The kind that came not from fear, but from a new standard. Jersey City, 9:16 a.m., 3 weeks later. The classroom didn't feel like a classroom. It was more like a holding cell with chairs. Gray carpet, thin tables, cheap overhead lights, no windows. But what made it truly suffocating wasn't the room. It was who sat in it. 6 former flight attendants, some suspended, some voluntarily reassigned, some too proud to admit what had really happened. And at the back, sitting stiff, lips pressed, arms crossed, was Meredith Blake. She wore no uniform now, just jeans, a button-down, and a nervous sweat. Her badge, which used to rest so neatly over her heart, was gone. She wasn't staff today. She was a student. Correction, a case study. The instructor, a quiet man in his 40s with a former military posture, stepped to the front. Welcome to day 1 of the FAA Aligned Passenger Equity Training Program. No one responded. He looked around the room, then clicked a remote. The screen lit up with a still image of a young black girl sitting quietly in first class. Hoodie, headphones, leather notebook open. Image taken seconds after the in-flight altercation that triggered the Ellington Ethics Review. Everyone stared. Everyone but Meredith. She already knew the face. She saw it every night when she closed her eyes. The instructor continued. Before we talk about policy, we talk about assumptions. This isn't a DEI workshop. This is compliance-based behavior remediation, meaning, he clicked to the next slide. You're not here to learn. You're here to face what you refused to learn when it mattered. Silence. A woman in the second row raised her hand. Are we being recorded? No, he said. But this will be logged in your reinstatement file. Meredith shifted. She wasn't sure if she wanted reinstatement. She wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. 10:02 a.m. First video module begins. The screen faded in from black. No music, no title, just a simple cut. Nia Ellington, seated in a dark gray armchair. Direct camera, no script, just her. She looked younger than Meredith remembered, or maybe just clearer. She started speaking, not like someone giving a lecture, not like someone issuing punishment. She spoke like someone who had seen enough. Most people who hold power in the sky never think they'll be questioned, not because they're right, but because they're used to being the only voice that counts. Meredith felt her chest tighten. But silence is also a voice, and what happens after silence tells you who was really in control. Cut to black. Then another clip. I don't want anyone fired. I don't want a media circus. I want people to sit with what they did, to sit long enough to feel it. Meredith swallowed hard. She hadn't felt it on the plane. She hadn't even felt it in the days after, when headlines hinted, when her shifts vanished, when HR started using phrases like temporary reassignment and public optics. But here, in this chair, in this classroom with no escape, she felt it now, every inch of it. 11:13 a.m. Second module. Unseen cost. The next video was different. Clips of passengers telling their own stories, spliced together with photos, receipts, journal entries. A woman describing the time she was asked to move from first class because someone assumed she'd walked up during boarding. A black pilot recounting the time ground crew radioed to ask if he had the right to be in the cockpit. A teenage boy talking about watching his mom cry silently after being called aggressive for asking for orange juice. The camera never cut away from their faces. It let them sit in their words. So the room had to sit in them too. Meredith couldn't hold her arms anymore. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands to her face. She didn't cry, but she stopped resisting. And that was new. 12:40 p.m. Break. People left the room for water, for phones, for oxygen. Meredith stayed. She sat alone in the back, replay after replay running in her head. The slap, the way Nia didn't move, the click of a phone, the phrase, "You didn't just slap me. You slapped the one person who decides if your company keeps flying." She didn't realize she'd whispered it out loud. A woman walking by glanced over, What? Nothing, Meredith said, eyes unfocused. Just remembering. 1:20 p.m., final clip of the day. The instructor dimmed the lights again. This time the screen showed a live FAA committee session. 4 CEOs seated in front of microphones. Behind them, the Flight Justice Charter logo floated on a digital screen. One of the moderators spoke. The Ellington Protocol is not about shaming people. It's about removing shame as a system of defense. You don't get to act, then explain. You act and own it. That's leadership. Another clip, shorter this time. Naya, again. Everyone wants forgiveness. Few want responsibility. The ones who grow are the ones who sit in the space between both. 2:15 p.m., end of day 1. As people filed out, muttering and rubbing temples, Meredith stood in the empty room. The instructor gathered his things, looked up. You staying? She nodded slowly. Did the session help? I don't know, she said honestly, but I stopped defending myself halfway through. He gave her a small nod. That's further than most. She looked back at the screen, still paused on Naya's last frame, expression calm, eyes steady, mouth closed, not needing to say another word, because the system was speaking for her now. Denver International Airport, 6:10 a.m. The badge was temporary. The uniform didn't carry stripes. The shift wasn't even real. It was part of the Flight Justice observation rotation. But Meredith was back on a plane. Cabin A3, Route 1470, Denver to Atlanta. Morning flight. Light turbulence expected. She adjusted the neckline of her vest, checked the mirror, and pulled her hair into a low bun. No lipstick, no perfume. Just protocol. She walked down the jet bridge with a clipboard and the calm of someone told to just watch and assist. But her chest was tight. No one had recognized her on base. The senior crew member, Clara, mid-30s, Filipino-American, had greeted her warmly, without pause. Thanks for flying shadow today. Just hang back, step in if I wave you forward, and if you need a break, row 7 galley is yours. Meredith nodded. Got it. Inside, the cabin was clean, warm, modern. Passengers were already seated. First class was full. She noted the layout, the tone, the crew posture. It wasn't like before. It was better. 6:48 a.m., boarding closed. A young black woman with braids and a soft cashmere coat stepped into the cabin, holding a ticket marked 1A. The flight attendant checking her in didn't blink. Welcome aboard, Miss Harper. Can I take your coat? Thanks, I'm good. Would you like water or coffee before we take off? It was effortless. No hesitation, no glances, no subtext. Meredith watched from the bulkhead, and for the first time in weeks, her hands didn't shake. 7:06 a.m. Takeoff. As the plane climbed through the clouds, Meredith reviewed the checklist from the Ellington observation form. She didn't need to tick the boxes, but she did anyway. Greeting protocol, equal service tone. No microaggression observed during boarding, first-class consistency maintained. She looked over at row 1 again. Miss Harper was opening a book, not glancing up, not guarding herself. It hit Meredith like a quiet punch. This girl didn't have to be ready for a fight, because the crew had already fought that fight for her, silently, every step. 7:29 a.m. Galley pause. Meredith leaned back against the wall of the galley, arms folded. Clara stepped in, sipping coffee. You good? Yeah, just observing. Cool. You've got that calm vibe. Old school cool. We need more like that. Meredith smiled faintly. I wasn't always. Clara raised an eyebrow. Then you learned fast. Pause. Then Clara added, You know, I had a passenger last week tell me it was the first time she didn't feel like she had to apologize for existing in first class. She said it like a passing comment, but Meredith felt her throat tighten. Did you say anything back? Just smiled. That's all she needed. 7:41 a.m. Mid-flight check-in. Meredith stood near the curtain divider as Clara moved through first class, offering snacks and hot towels. Everything flowed. Every move smooth. Every word equal. She glanced back at Miss Harper, now asleep against the window. And then, like reflex, she heard it again. Not out loud, but inside. That phrase from the video. Did I treat someone better today because I finally saw them for who they are, not who I assumed they were? She whispered it this time, only to herself. I think I finally do. 7:49 a.m. Cabin call. A light blinked in row 2. Meredith walked forward to assist, instinctively. An older white man looked up. Could you bring me a ginger ale, please? She nodded, smiling. Of course. No resistance, no judgment, no flash of tension. She served, returned, thanked him. The simplest moment, but it felt earned. 7:56 a.m. Cabin reset. As the flight began descent prep, Meredith took one last walk down the aisle. A child laughed in row 5. A couple held hands in row 6. A quiet hum of humanity everywhere. And at row 1, Miss Harper stirred. She sat up, stretched, and looked around. Her eyes met Meredith's for a brief second. Nothing dramatic, no recognition, no statement, just two women acknowledging each other with peace. 8:02 a.m. Galley debrief. Clara checked her watch. You're off duty once we touch down. Got plans? Meredith shook her head. Just reflecting. First day back? Sort of. Clara smiled. You belong here. You're grounded. That word hit deep. Grounded. Not punished. Rooted. Present. 8:12 a.m. Descent begins as the plane lowered through the clouds. The captain announced the landing. Meredith watched the faces. Calm. Rested. Safe. She looked down at her Ellington-issued clipboard. A box sat at the bottom of the form. Additional comments. She wrote slowly. No incidents. Crew maintained full alignment with Justice Charter standards. All passengers received equal tone, service, and dignity. Then she added one more line, not required. For the first time, I'm proud to have been part of this cabin. If you've ever been on a flight where the silence felt like protection, not tension, tell us where you're watching from. 3 weeks later, Sky North Executive Lounge, Terminal 4, JFK. It was quiet. Not the usual bustle of elite travelers or the chatter of frequent flyers, just silence, and a single table in the back corner, reserved but unmarked. Meredith stood near the coffee counter staring at her reflection in the polished espresso machine. She wasn't in uniform. Not anymore. This time she wore a dark slate suit, understated, elegant, civilian. Her invitation hadn't come through company email. It had arrived in an envelope, hand-delivered by a courier in a charcoal gray vest with no corporate logo. Inside was a single line. You have seen both sides. Now help decide which one deserves to fly. And below it, a meeting location. No time, no names. Just today's date. Across the room, a familiar face. Naya. Not flanked by advisors, not in a press-ready outfit. Just jeans, a fitted jacket, and an air of, I'm not here to pose. She sat with her back to the wall, facing the windows, watching planes taxi out. As Meredith approached, Naya didn't stand, didn't smile, just gestured to the empty seat across from her. Meredith sat. Silence for a moment. Then Naya spoke, calmly but precise. You've done the program, you've lived the fall, and you walked the aisle again, this time with eyes open. Meredith nodded. I did. So tell me, without sugarcoating it, is the charter working? Meredith didn't hesitate. Yes, not because people are scared of getting fired, but because, for once, they know someone's watching who isn't pretending to be blind. That made Naya smile, barely, Good, because I'm not just asking as the architect of the system anymore. She slid a document across the table, a Sky North internal restructuring memo. Meredith scanned it and froze, because at the bottom, under Proposed Cultural Reform Task Force, was a name, Meredith S. Senior Advisor, Internal Flight Conduct Reform. Why me? Meredith asked. Naya leaned forward. Because you lived it. You abused the seat of power. You broke someone who didn't fight back. And then you got broken by a system that forced you to feel it. She didn't blink. And most importantly, you learned. Meredith looked down at the offer again. It wasn't redemption. It was reconstruction. Later that day, Sky North Conference Wing, lower level. A closed-door session was already underway. 10 names, no press, no memos, no documentation. Yet. But these 10 individuals were about to shape the invisible backbone of one of the largest airline operations in the country. Meredith stepped in quietly. Naya was already at the table. So was the new CEO, a black woman named Rachel Langston, who had been appointed just weeks earlier after Randall Geiss's forced resignation. Rachel nodded as Meredith entered. We've heard the metrics, we've read the audits, but we haven't heard from a single flight attendant who's lived the reform as both cause and consequence. All eyes turned. Meredith took a breath, then stood. My name is Meredith Whitmore. I've been a flight attendant for 20 years. Last month, I was suspended for slapping a 13-year-old black girl in first class after assuming she didn't belong. The room didn't flinch. They already knew. I didn't raise my voice that day. I didn't curse. But I carried decades of unspoken judgment into that aisle and lashed it across a child's dignity. Pause. No amount of retraining can undo that moment. But walking back into a plane, seeing what this new system has done, that showed me something I'd never truly seen before. Another breath. Passengers don't want luxury. They want to feel safe, not just from turbulence, but from us. She sat down. No one clapped, but no one looked away. And in that silence, something shifted. Later, walking through Terminal 4, Meredith didn't take the elevator. She took the long route, through the main atrium, past Gate 36, past the exact corridor where she once stood, lips curled, wrist raised. And there, across the terminal floor, she saw someone. It wasn't Naya. It was the girl, Naya's daughter, Janelle, wearing a hoodie, headphones in, walking confidently toward a boarding gate. She was alone, and she looked free. Not defensive, not cautious, just free. Meredith didn't call out, didn't wave, just stepped aside quietly, because now there was space. Back at the lounge, 4 p.m. Meredith opened her laptop, typed one word at the top of the new Sky North internal manual. Dignity. Then below it, the highest form of service isn't a smile. It's seeing someone fully, even when they don't see you back. 2 months later, Washington, D.C., FAA Summit on Passenger Rights Reform. The hall was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from disinterest, but the sharp, loaded quiet that fills a room when people sense something historic is about to be said. The podium stood beneath a massive banner that read, Justice at 30,000 feet, building passenger dignity into air travel. The speaker list included CEOs, government regulators, union reps, a few carefully selected passengers. Cameras were ready, reporters perched, streaming already live to 3 networks and 10 aviation blogs. But the name that wasn't printed in the program was the one everyone had begun whispering about, Meredith Whitmore. She hadn't spoken publicly since the slap, since the video, since she became the face of everything wrong with air travel, and then, quietly, everything changing. She stood behind the curtain now, holding her notes. Her fingers didn't shake. The MC's voice boomed across the hall. Our next speaker is someone whose story started with a mistake, a moment of judgment that became a national conversation. But instead of retreating, she returned. And what she brings us today is not just insight, but proof that accountability can lead to transformation. Please welcome Meredith Whitmore. Polite applause, not explosive, not cold. Meredith stepped out. She wore a navy blue dress, a pin that read Flight Justice Charter Advocate. And on her face, not shame, not defensiveness, but quiet ownership. She stood straight. She spoke without clearing her throat. My name is Meredith. I used to think I was good at my job. A pause. I believed being polite meant being fair. I believed following protocol meant doing the right thing. And then, one day, I slapped a 13-year-old black girl in first class because I decided, in that split second, that she didn't belong there. No gasps, just stillness. That moment was recorded. That moment defined me. That moment ended the career I thought I wanted. And I thank God it did. She spoke without a script. The notes stayed folded in her hand. She spoke from the heart. What I did to that child didn't come from a place of rage. It came from something worse. Habit. A habit of assuming. A habit of dividing. A habit of protecting a system that only served people who looked and dressed like me. But here's what I learned on the other side of that scandal. Systems can change. Habits can be broken. And dignity is not an upgrade you earn with miles. She looked toward the corner where FAA Chairwoman Ellis sat. Today, I'm proud to be part of a team working on the Flight Justice Index. Not to shame flight crews, but to give them the training, the backing, and the cultural clarity to see passengers fully, to notice when someone is being overlooked, and to act not out of fear but out of shared human decency. A few heads nodded. A few eyes blinked faster than normal. We're not asking for perfect. We're asking for presence. After the applause. This time, it was stronger, earned. As Meredith walked off the stage, Naya met her halfway. No words, just a hand on her shoulder and a glance that said, "You did what most can't. You stood back up." In the back corner of the room, seated silently, was Janelle, the girl who had once been slapped. No press badge, no camera, just a teen girl sitting beside her mother, watching the woman who had once broken her, now trying to rebuild something bigger. Their eyes met. Meredith gave the smallest of nods. Janelle didn't nod back, but she didn't look away either. And sometimes, that's enough. 3 weeks later. Internal Sky North update. Effective immediately, Meredith Whitmore has been appointed Director of In-Flight Human Ethics Development, overseeing interagency training standards, employee support systems, and the Flight Justice Charter quarterly reviews. Across social media, opinions clashed. Some still labeled her a villain. Others called her a cautionary tale. But a quiet and growing segment of passengers, particularly women over 55, shared the clip of her speech with captions like, "We need more women who own their mistakes. This is how you face the music with grace." She didn't run, she rebuilt. 1 month later, Flight T-142, JFK to Sacramento. A woman in her 60s boards slowly, gripping her tote. She looks hesitant, unsure. A uniformed attendant approaches, not Meredith. A new crew member, younger but well-trained. "Welcome, ma'am. Let me help you with that." "I'm in first class, seat 3C. "Of course. And if you need anything at all, you let us know." The woman smiles, gently. "Thank you. I was nervous. I haven't flown in years." "You're in good hands. This airline takes dignity seriously now." Behind her, Meredith boards quietly, badge clipped, clipboard in hand. She's not here to be seen. She's here to make sure everyone else is. 4 months later. Phoenix, Arizona. Sky North Global Ethics Conference. The morning sun poured through the glass dome of the Sonoran Convention Center. Palms lined the plaza, but inside the main hall, it was all steel, screens, and silence. The hum of transformation buzzed underneath the surface. It was the first time SkyNorth Airlines had ever hosted an open conference on ethics. Not routes, not revenue, not quarterly gains. The word dignity appeared more than profit on the slide decks. That alone marked a tectonic shift. At the heart of this change was a document once mocked, now respected: the Flight Justice Charter. It sat in every seat, leather-bound and embossed. Across 12 pages, it outlined a new industry code of conduct, co-authored by regulators, passenger rights groups, behavioral psychologists, and a former flight attendant named Meredith Whitmore. The room was packed. Top-tier airline executives sat beside junior flight crew trainers. Federal Transportation Committee members shared tables with passengers and advocacy groups, and up front, on a wide panel stage, sat 6 people, one of whom was now impossible to miss: Nia Reynolds. She was no longer just a girl in a hoodie on a plane. She had become a symbol, not for anger, not even for justice, but for consequences that could build something better. Nia sat in a tailored navy suit, her hair braided back, expression calm but unreadable. She hadn't come to gloat. She came because she was asked to speak, because some things had to be said face to face. The opening keynote chairwoman Ellis took the stage first. Airlines once competed over legroom, then food, then miles. We believe the next era will be defined by something rarer: respect. Not respect earned, but respect given, the moment someone steps onto the aircraft. Today, we introduce the Flight Justice Index, a measurable system built with accountability, cultural awareness, and enforcement at its core. And its first test begins now. She stepped back and gestured to Nia. This initiative began because one person said no. Nia, would you join us? The testimony, Nia stood slowly. She didn't carry notes. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but exact. I'm not here to be your inspiration. I'm not here to be your warning. I'm here because I was a child on a plane who got slapped in front of a dozen strangers and nobody stopped it. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know what to do. This charter, it's not about guilt. It's about guidance. It gives you a path when instinct fails you. It gives your crew the backup to act right, even when passengers act wrong. She paused. And most of all, it lets people like me exist in first class without having to prove we belong there. Silence. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. And then, applause anyway. Because the truth, when clean and unadorned, lands harder than any slogan. Backstage, Meredith waited in the wings. She watched Nia. She took no photos. She signed no books. She waited. When Nia finally stepped off stage, they met eyes. You were brilliant, Meredith said softly. You were ready to listen, Nia replied. That was all. Nothing more was needed. Flight Justice Charter. Implementation rollout. 2 weeks later, 73% of U.S. airlines had signed the charter. The FAA issued a formal statement recommending it be adopted as part of required training. 3 European carriers requested permission to translate and localize it. And on Delta Flight 933 from Atlanta to Newark, a woman was denied boarding after verbally abusing a South Asian family during pre-check. The gate agent pointed calmly to a sticker beside her badge. Certified by Flight Justice Index. There were no lawsuits, just consequences. Predictable, transparent, swift. The effect on the ground news segments began airing case studies. Ratings rose. Panels discussed not just the incident, but the system that changed. Passengers shared stories online. Was upgraded by a flight attendant who said she was trained to notice quiet dignity. Made me cry. Heard a kid get praised instead of scolded for being nervous. Charters working. Didn't think it would matter, but I fly for work 3x a week, and yeah, I feel safer, seen. Even skeptics admitted something had shifted. One last moment. A letter from a passenger. 6 weeks into the rollout, Meredith received a letter, forwarded from Sky North headquarters. Dear Ms. Whitmore, I don't know if you remember me. I was in 2B on that flight, the one where it happened. I didn't stand up, I didn't say anything. I froze. I've regretted it ever since. Last week, I flew Sky North again. My daughter was with me. She's 12, a little shy. A flight attendant knelt down to eye level and asked her if she wanted headphones. Called her ma'am, with the same respect they gave me. I cried. She didn't understand why, but I did. Thank you for turning a terrible day into a better world. A mom who will never stay silent again. 6 months later. Brooklyn, New York. There's a small coffee shop on Green Avenue. It's nothing fancy. A faded chalkboard sign out front says, "Yes, we have oat milk," and the barista always forgets to wipe the steam wand. But Naya liked it here. No velvet ropes, no cameras, no assumptions. She sat by the window, her laptop open, earbuds in. Not to block out the world, but to choose what came in. She was editing her college essay, the last round, and this time she finally liked what it said. I used to think power came from proving people wrong. Now I know real power is deciding who you want to be, even when no one's looking. The world didn't go silent, but it noticed. There were still headlines. There were still people who said it was just one incident, but the numbers told another story. 129 airlines signed the Flight Justice Charter. 37 countries began integrating bias prevention into flight training. FAA incidents involving racial discrimination dropped by 48% in Q2. Customer trust ratings on Sky North jumped 32%, the largest in the industry. And Naya? She didn't go viral again. She didn't need to. Her seat in 2A, the one they tried to take, had become something bigger. It became a symbol, not of status, but of staying seated, of not moving, not folding, not leaving just because someone told you, you don't belong here. The girl in 14. On a Sky North flight from LAX to DC, a 9-year-old black girl named Harper sat alone. Her mom was 2 rows back, separated by a ticketing glitch. A man in a suit, first class, looked at her, then looked again. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" he asked. Harper didn't flinch. She pulled out a laminated card her mom had given her. It read, "My name is Harper. I belong in 14C. If you have a problem with that, please talk to the crew. They're trained in flight justice." The man blinked. The flight attendant, trained under the new system, stepped in before he could say another word. Politely, firmly, with authority. The man sat down in his own seat. Quietly. Harper watched the clouds roll by, legs swinging. The quiet network. In terminals and backrooms, in HR trainings and university programs, a network was forming. Quiet but firm. The charter had spawned something unexpected: mentorship. Flight crews started peer reporting not to punish, but to protect each other. Veteran staff took younger ones under wing. "You see someone about to cross a line," one instructor said. "Offer your shoulder before the world slaps their wrist." And for the first time, crews weren't just trained to spot danger. They were trained to spot dignity. Meredith's last flight. Meredith Whitmore, the former attendant who had once slapped Naya, quietly resigned. Not in disgrace, but in acknowledgement. She wrote no memoir, took no interviews, but left a single statement. "I was wrong. I confused authority with importance. I confused discomfort with threat. But most of all, I forgot who I was supposed to be when no one's watching. I hope the system we built helps others remember better than I did." Sky North offered her a consulting role. She declined. Instead, she began mentoring young attendants in a training program called Second Chances. The first thing she teaches? Listening. A new name takes off. 6 months after the conference, a press release hit the wire. Sky North Airlines announces new premier cabin class, the Naya class, inspired by the girl who redefined what leadership looks like. Features included noise-canceling headsets available for free first-class youth options and booklets, digital tablets that open with, "Welcome, you belong here." Naya didn't design it. She didn't even know it was coming. But when she saw the press clip, she smiled. And then, quietly, closed her laptop. Some seats you fight for. Others, the world finally reserves for you. One final ride. Washington, D.C. Naya visited Capitol Hill that fall. Not as a guest, not for a photo op, but as a junior advisor. She sat with lawmakers and policy architects, reviewing early drafts of a bill proposing mandatory dignity ratings across federal transportation, trains, buses, ferries. She spoke less than others, but when she did, people listened. No seat should have to be earned with pain. No person should need a meltdown to be heard. The room was silent. A pen scratched the next draft. Epilogue. The quiet seat in row 2A. Sometimes people board Sky North and glance at that seat. Some smile, some nod. Once, a crew member placed a single white rose on the tray table before boarding began. Not for mourning, but for memory. And every now and then, a girl boards in sneakers and a hoodie, earbuds in, smile faint, eyes sharp. And she sits down, in 2A, not because she has to, but because now she can. Have you ever had a moment, quiet but powerful, that changed how people saw you? Tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever stood your ground like Naya did.